in a broader scale, maybe their challenge compared to someone else's isn't as challenging, but understanding that each person has different thresholds of stress or understanding of challenge. Maybe this might be the first time they've gone through that challenge and you've gone through it 5 times. So if they come to you, it's not about what scale are they on the level of how challenging it is. For them at that point in time, it's a challenge.
Hello, it's Sammy.
And I'm Amelia.
Welcome back to S3E25 podcast, a podcast where we aim to build a better mindset for better relationships.
Mamma mia. And all right, let's get back into serious mode. Building better mindset part is what we're going to be talking about today. And it's all understanding why sometimes saying that it could be worse is not the best thing to say to someone else or even to yourself.
Yeah, so how this topic came about is I had a conversation with a friend who essentially lost his job for 2 years. So it was a big struggle for him. And long story short, he treated everyone quite negatively, thought about things quite negatively. So the ultimate question for us is what is our initial thoughts or what's our first thoughts when it comes to disadvantaged moments?
It's a really interesting question because although we're coming from the angle of people saying it could be worse and that's a form of response, to me personally, when that happens, or especially when it happens to myself, my first question is what went wrong? What could I have done? And those are really the questions that I start with first.
The first thing that comes to my mind is, fuck, what do I do? I go, fuck, all right, well, what went wrong? How do I navigate this?
Yeah. But it is also said that a lot of people do come in the point where it saying that it could be worse. And the reason why I choose my words wisely with this, and I don't always say that, is because especially when you're saying, oh, it could be worse or someone had it worse over there, it really highlights the other person that you're pointing or comparing to. And now you're making it a comparison, although it's there with good intentions, where you're trying to uplift their emotion and be like, at least you're not here, or at least this didn't happen, which is all from a good place. But now you're making the other person who did have it a little worse or a little more unfortunate now in the spotlight as well, which isn't a good feeling in my place. So I'm not saying that I completely don't and avoid this term. I do say it, but I choose it wisely.
Yeah, interesting perspective. I think for me, I feel like I would ever use that comparison, and that's only really if I'm trying to bring someone back to reality.
Fishing them back in.
Yeah, I'm trying to, fucking...
Why'd you copy me?
Yeah. You gotta fish them back, mate.
Yeah. So in this episode, we'll dig between the good versus the bad as to when to use this term or why people might use this term versus also why it's not so great to use it, because there's actually an article or a few articles out there to explain why it's not a good thing. So let's first start off with the good. Like when do you see it to be a good thing to use? It could be worse.
Yeah, like I said, bringing them back to reality is more sharing a perspective, because it's more about, hey, look, this situation, yes, it is a shit situation, but we've got to understand that, hey, look, from an alternative perspective, it's very much like, hey, this person has been in the same situation, but they've got themselves out. You can too. If they can, you can too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like a motivator.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's good to use it when you're also acknowledging. It's like, hey, I acknowledge you're in a bad place, but at least you're not here, or it could be worse. And it's really, as long as you've acknowledged that person's situation, what they're going through, and sharing that it could be worse. But when you say it, in my terms, because words are quite important, it isn't comparing it to anything else. You're just saying potentially your situation could have been worse. So that really opens their eyes and be like, hey, yeah, there is bigger matters out there. I can work through this. I can walk through this challenge and keep moving forward.
Yeah. And it's hard sometimes when you try to piece the words together, but making sure that you use the words that is gentle and, soothing, not using a knife and jabbing them fucking 100 times.
What are you, gangster?
Yeah, so how it can be a positive impact to the person in terms of sharing that perspective, like I was saying before, sharing perspective, sharing a different angle, a different motive, trying to really get them in a positive way to think, look, if this person can do it, you can too. And it's really building that mindset perspective. Yes, understanding and not comprehending that you're probably not feeling the best, and that's normal. But it's really just that, like I said, acknowledging that situation and making it a good situation to some perspective.
Well, I think it's more like when you come in this context of saying it could be worse, it's helping that person see the glass half full concept as opposed to the glass half empty, because they may be in a negative spot in a very down moment and they're just like, nothing's going right for me. Things are going wrong for me and nothing's happening. I can't get out of this. And you like saying, hey, it could be worse. These things could have happened, but it's not. It's helping them being like a motivator and be like, your glass is actually half full. It's not full yet, but you can still keep on going.
Yeah, but a big part of the discussion today really is more about the negatives of comparison or comparing when it comes to this. So I think the biggest and the obvious one is when we're making comparisons in a conversation, it really comes down to, well, you mentioned it before, it's how we use the right words in terms of explanation. And most times we might have positioned it or worded it incorrectly where it's perceived the wrong way. So in this instance, it's really dismissing the person's emotions up front.
Yeah, because if you haven't actually acknowledged, or if that person is talking to you, you haven't acknowledged where they're at, why they're feeling what they're feeling, and you just straight up say, oh, it could be worse, then you're really dismissing their emotions because you haven't really heard how they feel. You're not like, I empathize with you. I understand that it can be difficult. You're just like, oh, it could be worse. And you're just like brushing off their feelings, and they came to you to talk for a reason. So that's one of the biggest issues. Another one is really making them feel unheard. So similar to dismissing their feelings is when you're just saying that they feel unheard, they've just shared you their problem, their challenge, and you're just like, oh, it could be worse. And they might feel insignificant, or they're like, oh, maybe my challenges aren't really that big anyway. So why do I need to speak up?
Yeah. A good example is from the movie The Hangover, where Ken Jeong winds down the window and he's like, but did you die, bitch? That's an example as to dismissing and being unheard straight away.
A quick interruption. We want to thank all of you who have been supporting us. And if you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe on our YouTube.
If you found any of our episodes helpful, please share to your friends and family as it would help us grow.
Now back to the episode. So some personal experience, and noting that these all come from a good place because upbringing, Asian parenting, they had their own challenges and they're all learning through how to be a parent for the first time as well. But upbringing did really show a lot of this. It could be worse kind of situation because I already was a person who kept a lot of feelings and problems inside. And when I do actually choose to speak up or say something about it, a lot of it was always like, oh, you'll be fine. Or, yeah, mostly that kind of concept. And because of that, sometimes it's like, oh, I've actually taken the courage to come and speak to you now, or taken the courage to open up about a certain thing that I've been thinking about for so long, and to hear like, oh, you'll be fine, or like, oh, why are you talking about this? Or like, don't worry about it. It really is dismissing my emotions because going back to that feeling, I'm coming to you for a reason. I really wanted to talk about this problem that I've had on my mind, and to feel like my thoughts and feelings and opinions didn't matter. That really closed me off. And then I just go back into my shell and be like, okay, I guess I tried to talk to someone and now I can't because they weren't really interested in the first place. Now I need to go back into figuring it out on my own.
Damn, that sounds quite rough there.
As rough as it is, I think it built me to who I am today. Like, it built me to be able to sit with my own thoughts and sit with my challenges and work through challenges myself and not stress over it. Like, stress as in like healthy stress, not like frantic, like flailing my hands everywhere kind of stress, and be able to think about problems with a level head. But at the same time, it did make me feel like people didn't want to understand my emotions and how I was feeling at the time. So a lot of things it built up over the years, and it sometimes still come up to this day where I don't understand my feelings because I've shared it, and then people tell me it's like, "Oh, you shouldn't be feeling this way," or like, "Don't worry about it." Then I'm like, "Okay, I won't worry about it." But that really internally is putting stuff under the rug, and you don't really explore or think about that. So when I first feel angry or feel sad, it's like, should I be feeling sad? Why am I feeling sad? Or like, I'm a bad person for feeling sad or angry. So this is the repercussions of not dealing with it or not being heard.
Asian parents, mate.
Yeah, but like I said, disclaimer, it all comes from a good place, and they were all learning for the first time as well, and they probably had similar situations as they were growing up too. So common in an Asian upbringing, but also this is my take on what happened. If someone told me it could be worse, or don't worry about it, or doesn't matter.
Yeah. One personal experience is actually a conversation that I had with one of my mates who was going through a period, and I mentioned this at the very beginning, where essentially finish studying your degree. And as most people going through that stage in their life, they think, okay, well, you finish your degree, you get a job, you just figure out life and get work within that industry that you've essentially studied. My mate at the time, he was out of a job for essentially 2 years. So, with out of anyone that is going through that journey, you'd be quite demotivated. You'd be a little stressed. You'd be, sad and upset in terms of not being able to find the right job.
Negative thoughts start to swallow you up.
Yeah. And that's exactly what happened. And essentially, negative thoughts came up. He was thinking negatively about everything himself, especially with his emotions and also how he treated people around him. So he would see people that were getting jobs and he'd be jealous naturally. He'd be jealous and also speak highly in terms of negative, highly of that person and be like, fuck this guy, he got a job. Why can't I get a job? He doesn't deserve a job. So he had all of
Mm.
that negativity within just the whole general train of thought. And it got to a point where a lot of our friends did see that. And it's very much a point of, okay, let's sit him down and actually talk to him. I think the first thing that we really did is just, hey, look, we acknowledge that you're in a shit situation and it is hard, is very, very difficult to get yourself out of that. But just to be where you are is such a rough patch. But you've got to realize that, hey, there are people who are in a similar case to you and at some instances have been in a dry spot for longer than you, have essentially pulled themselves out of that.
So you're coming in the context of saying it could be worse to help them get out of this
Yeah,
spot.
that's right. So it's about comparing their situation to someone else's situation, but
To bring perspective.
to bring perspective, but motivate them, bring them back to reality of, okay, you're being so negative. Hey, let's be more positive. Let's see if we can get moving away from this negativity.
Did it help?
Yeah, I think eventually it did. I
Mm.
think it was like another 3 or 4 months before this person actually did find a job.
Did you ever ask why he started to think so negatively, or like what is affecting his thoughts?
Yeah, I one of the biggest thing I asking was, I can see that you are becoming more jealous of other people who are finding jobs, and I asked, why are you talking shit about this person, or you speaking so negative, and it was exactly that. He was jealous, and he was at the end of the story. It was very much like, look, I'm jealous, and I'm upset that someone like this person can get a job straight away, whereas I've been trying for so long, working on this and that, but I can't get the results that I want, which I definitely understand, especially when you're in that situation. It is very, very difficult to work on yourself constantly,
Mm.
but not really get anywhere.
But when you were sharing, or when you and your friends were sharing that it could be worse, what were you bringing perspective to? Was it more like, hey, at least you have a house, or hey, at least you've got this? Like, what were you sharing?
Yeah, it was two components from what I recall. One was, hey, look, yes, you're in a disadvantaged situation, but at the same time, you've got the time and opportunity to now work on yourself. Every time that you've gone to an interview and you've been rejected, you can ask for the feedback. You can work on improvements, whether it's knowledge gaps or maybe the way you present yourself.
But not just that, every interview that you go to is also an experience, because then now you know what type of questions you might be preparing for, you know how to present yourself better, or yeah, just preparing for the interview itself, because someone who hasn't gone to an interview at all, as opposed to someone who's gone to 5 interviews, they've got way more knowledge than someone who
Exactly.
hasn't.
Yeah, it's bloody daunting, but it's an experience at the end of the day. And the second component really was is to make that comparison, giving him the motivation that, hey, if this person can, you can too, for sure.
Yeah, and especially if it's coming from jealousy and all that, and flipping that mindset and perspective being, if he's thinking, oh, this guy wasn't that great, but he managed to get a job, yeah, maybe you might think that about that person. But if you already don't think he wasn't that great in certain skill sets and he managed to get one, that is a motivator that you, if you believed in yourself, that you can also get a job too.
Exactly right. And that was the perspective that we were trying to really hone in at the time.
No, that's great. And we also want to share, and we've broken it into two parts. This is on the research side on why people say that it's not the best thing to say that it could be worse. So we're sharing it and breaking it down into, if you were saying it to yourself, why it could be bad. And then also if you were saying it to other people, why it could be bad. Let's start off with when you're saying it to yourself. What are the effects of doing this when you have this self talk?
That's a good question. I think if you're saying that to yourself, I feel like it's really a downer. You're putting yourself down so bad that you're not realistically seeing what your self worth is. You're not seeing your value. What are you trying to propose? What are you trying to sell? I think you're really dismissing that.
And that could be seen in your friend's situation
Yeah,
too,
100%.
not seeing his self worth, and then he's looking to other people to make the comparison so he can make himself feel better. But really, he just really needed to look inside into what can he bring to the table.
That's right. Yeah. And following that is what he was also doing was he was selling himself short because he wasn't
Mm.
realizing that he was worth more. He could bring more value to whatever the business is or whatever the company is.
And that's it's easier said than done, because that's a confidence thing, and also especially fresh out of uni and you haven't really experienced the real career world. You don't know what your potentials are. So it can be easy where you might sell yourself short because you're like, I don't know if I can do this. So obviously easier said than done. But when you're saying that to yourself, where you're like thinking that it could be worse or whatever, and you're selling yourself short, it's not always the best thing to say or think to yourself.
Yeah, and I can understand it is very difficult because it's when you're stuck in that drought, if you want to call it the drought, and you're not really in tune with yourself and you're dismissing how you truly feel and you're not really looking at it from that holistic perspective, you never really give yourself the opportunity to work on yourself.
Well, I think also in a context like this is a good example when you're saying that to yourself, it could be worse in a relationship sense. Say you were in a toxic relationship, not the one where you're thinking really bad, but it's just someone that doesn't align with you, and you're choosing to stick through that relationship because you're thinking, oh, it could be worse. But really, the values and everything in that relationship isn't anything that align with you. And you're like, oh, at least I'm not in an abusive relationship. At least this guy's not doing this, but there's really nothing in that that's keeping you happy or keeping you like, oh, I am invested in this relationship. And then that way you choose not to work through your problems because you're just thinking and landing to the thought it could be worse. So you're, in a sense, brushing it under the rug and just leaving it as that. So until you face that, and yeah, it could be worse, but is this something that you want? Is this something that I want to keep working with? And the answer is no, then you need to move forward from that.
Yeah, yeah. And shoveling shit under the rug is really bad as if you have multiple things that are accumulating, it would take a lot longer to
Unravel,
well,
to clean up.
clean your shit up.
Clean yours and their shit up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But at the same time, on a horizontal scale, you're brushing away with like time to sit with your own feelings because you're like, oh, it could be worse. But then you're not really sitting there thinking, what else can I do for myself? Or what else can I do to work myself out of this situation so that it doesn't repeat or it doesn't happen again? Like you're just brushing away time to think and understand your own feelings.
Yeah, I was going to say,
You're kind of in a denial phase.
yeah, you are definitely in a denial phase. And the biggest thing is when you're shoveling so much shit, you're not really using that motivator or the issues as a motivator to get yourself out because you're dismissing it. Yeah. And that's so much opportunity that you can use that you're not really leveraging off. Maybe I'm seeing it in a different way, but
Well, I think it can apply to so many different situations, like your friend one, the relationship one, it could be work. There's so many different contexts, and like these points can be worked. These points may come through together or individually.
mm. But if we flip the switch, what if someone was saying that to you?
Well, similar to what I said with the parent upbringing situation, really made me feel like my feelings and emotions were being dismissed, like it was insignificant, I wasn't being heard. So these are definitely the signs of where it can be bad, especially when it wasn't acknowledged. But also, I think when someone's saying that to me, it's sort of making a comparison between me and someone else. So now it's like, oh, like, don't worry about you. Like, at least you're not as bad as that person. And I'm like, okay, then what about me?
Yeah, I was going to say that's how I would feel if someone was to make the comparison. It's not about the comparison, it's more the dismissal of my feelings and emotions because I've come to you to share my vulnerability, but
Mm.
you've essentially fucking fucked that off and just,
Deflecto
yeah,
Ceto.
deflecto cedo cuz and just fucking compared me to someone else. It's like that's the kind of feeling I would get.
Yeah. And then also understanding that when someone comes to you in a broader scale, maybe their challenge compared to someone else's isn't as challenging, but understanding that each person has different thresholds of stress or understanding of challenge. Maybe this might be the first time they've gone through that challenge and you've gone through it 5 times. So if they come to you, it's not about what scale are they on the level of how challenging it is for them at that point in time. It's a challenge. It's a unfortunate situation for them at that time. So it's not good or ideal to be like it could be worse or someone has it worse and comparing it in that manner because yeah, their level of stress and their experience in that point in time is different.
That's something I am guilty on at times. I won't say sometimes. There are moments where I completely disregard the person's understanding of how they handle challenges and stress and things like that. And I would approach them thinking, "Hey man, you should be better than that. You should be stronger than that." But not really realizing that maybe their experiences aren't the way that my experiences are.
Mm. Which is hard because sometimes it's also person to person. I was going to say earlier, sometimes when people say this to me, it doesn't affect me, but that's also because I've been through so many times of people saying it to me. And I can attest that, yeah, you have said that to me before as well. But to me, as a person who understands where you're coming from, because some people might not, they'd be like, hey, why did you just ignore completely what I said and my feelings? But to me, I know you're coming from a place where you're pushing me to be like, I know you can go through this. I know you can do better. So I come from that understanding. So again, that goes back into each individual, their thresholds, their level of understanding, and also what is your relationship with this person? Is it a close friend? Is it a mentor? Is it an acquaintance? Like depends on who says it to you as well.
Yeah, and that's why when I look on social media, like your TikToks, Instagram comments, and things like that, some of those comments are quite harsh at times because, yes, social media is for the purpose of social, like social aspect of,
Wait, so some people comment saying it could be worse?
well, yeah, like for an example, when you have Instagram or TikTok, for an example, like people are explaining like their stories and things like a disadvantaged moment or something like that,
No,
and
like
you'll
too
read.
bad, so
Yeah,
sad.
you read comments and some of the people are like full smash them like, "Oh, you're a fucking ball baggy. What are you doing like this and that?"
What are you
And
doing?
yeah, what are you doing, man? You doing like things like that and without really putting much.
There's no
Yeah.
context and they don't understand the context. There's always more to the story and social media can be
Yeah,
harsh.
it can be brutal.
But I think in a broader perspective, in if you're saying it to yourself or if someone's saying it to you or vice versa, it can prevent you from seeking help. And that was really clear and definitive in my case because I took the courage to open up, share my feelings when I already kept a lot of stuff inside, got dismissed, and then now I'm like, okay, I'll just revert to my shell. I'll work on it myself. There's no point me sharing to anyone. And that really did snowball into legit anyone. First, it was I wasn't going to talk to my parents because there's no point seeking mentorship in that or guidance. And then that eventually turned into my lifestyle. There's no one, like I thought, there's no one that I can lean on. There's no one I can open up to because if I shared any thoughts, one, it may be insignificant. Two, someone might be like, oh, why are you thinking like that? Or like, you're an idiot. And then three, there's no point in me opening up. So I didn't seek help. I didn't reach out to people. And I think until I was 21, 23, 4, whatever that age was, that's when I started to really open up. And it was hard because I never knew how to do it and it was challenging. And going through that many years without opening up, things do bottle up. So it's not a good thing.
Yeah, I was going to say I resonate that because my parents indirectly would tell me not to like to be stronger and to not essentially not be a bitch. So I think when I reflect back, I definitely never went to my parents for help. I never asked them questions. Like I felt like I couldn't only because then maybe there was a barrier in communication or the line of open communication wasn't there. Maybe that's how
Mm.
I kind of felt. And it was only until maybe 17, 18 when I started dating, that's where I had to open up and learn a lot of things from that point.
Yeah, but didn't you share a lot of your thoughts and feelings with your sister?
Yeah, and that's actually a great point. Luckily, my sister was there. My sister was there that I could talk to her, but it was good because she was sharing her thoughts to me. So her doing that to me made me realize, okay, this is okay.
It's relatability, I
Yeah, you can
guess.
relate.
Yeah, so understanding makes a difference, like acknowledging and understanding makes a massive difference. But we also wanted to share because it's an unfortunate or not so great situation, doesn't always mean it's a bad thing. So stress and challenges need to happen in life for you to learn from it, need to happen for you to gain experience.
Yeah, that's right. So the biggest thing with the disadvantages and stress is, well, it comes down to mindset realistically, right? And I think the biggest thing there that we have to reiterate is stress and those disadvantages. Yes, they are roadblocks or restrictions, but those are moments and experiences that we can use to build upon that and
Mm.
improve our situation from that.
Yeah, and that's why for me, my first self-talk when we first initially asked, like, when an unfortunate situation happens, what is the first thing that we think, or what is the first thought that comes to mind? Mine is what went wrong, what happened, and that really is to reassess what can I do better to move forward next time, or if this situation occurs again, like what can I do, or even if something's like similar, not like one for one the same situation, at least I've got some sort of knowledge rather than sitting there and be like, oh, it could be worse, and then brushing it off, and then it happens again. There's really what went wrong? What can I do next time? How can I do better?
Yeah, that's a good one. But when it comes to the stress component, stress has a positive impact, as we mentioned, right?
There's healthy stress and there's unhealthy stress.
Yeah. So the positives of stress is what we can use to our advantage. And I think as an example, things that we see that there's people out there who, when it comes to stress, they freak out and they get all anxious and just in terms of handling those moments, they're all over the place. Being able to understand stress and be able to handle stress, you can use those moments to better what that situation is.
I think also if there was those kind of situations where it does lead you to think it could be worse, don't think that you're the victim. Don't catastrophize your situation. Like yeah, it can be bad, but don't catastrophize it and make it worse than it actually is in your head. And really sit there and be like, hey, okay, really, what went wrong? Or can I fix this? If I can't fix this, what can I do next time?
That's a powerful moment. But what the question we need to be really asking is, what is a healthy approach to these disadvantaged moments?
I think the main one that we've already covered a lot of times over this episode is really acknowledge your feeling. And if it's someone else, acknowledge their feeling. That's the key thing first, rather than going straight into, hey, at least you're not in this situation, or that could be worse. It's first acknowledge it, that you understand, like, yeah, it's a difficult situation for you. And let's sit down together. What can we do? Can I help you in doing something better, or can I help you to guide you to a better place, whatever it is?
Yeah. And the big part really is understanding and comprehending that challenges and stress is a normal part of life. But adding to that is we really need to make sure that we treat yourself, and understanding of kindness as well. So
What? Treat yourself with kindness
yeah, treat
and
yourself.
be
Yeah,
understanding.
yeah. Treat yourself with kindness.
And
Treat
be
yourself.
understanding, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, so it's making sure that you understand, what the situation is.
Yeah, because self-talk is important. And if something went wrong and you called yourself an idiot, you will feel like an idiot. Whereas opposed to you making something wrong and you're like, hey, that's okay. I stuffed up here. It's normal. And I can only, like, you can't change the past. I can only change what I can do from now. So be okay with it. Obviously, you may feel a little uncomfortable, feel a little, I don't know, but treat yourself with kindness.
And I think the holistic follow up is mindfulness. So be mindful of essentially what has triggered the situation, but also remember how to handle those situations for the next time or period or whenever the event that happens.
And I think from your story with your friend as well, that really shares a good lesson is how to shift your mindset. Because, yeah, it's a difficult situation, especially not being able to find a job for 2 years. It is worrying, and especially when work and career is such a big part of our life, by remembering to shift our mindset. So don't compare, don't minimize yourself, don't make yourself sell yourself short, which is what we said before, and shift that into self compassion, which is what we were saying. Treat yourself with kindness and be proactive to move forward and how you can solve this problem, or if it's a challenge, how can I overcome this challenge? And every small step will add and accumulate to something bigger.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing that you left out there is shifting your energy, from being pulled down, negative into something more positive that you can essentially dodge and weave and bop and, come back with
Slingshot yourself forward.
come back with a counter attack, you know what I'm saying? With a cross hook, or maybe a low kick or a knee or an elbow, something like that, you know what I'm saying? Like,
What, are we boxing now?
yeah, it's all about Thai boxing, baby.
Well, these are our tips. These are our thoughts and opinions on when you're saying it could be worse. Just sharing where sometimes it may not be the best moments to say it. Not saying you can't ever say it. If it helps, like in your context of sharing it with your friend and bring perspective to his mindset, might be helpful, but also be wary of how you do it. Acknowledge people's feelings, and that's it.
Couldn't have said it perfectly.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you.
couldn't.
Relax there. Well, thank you again, guys, for joining us, and we will see you guys in the next episode.
Goodbye.
Peace.